Hello everyone, and welcome back to our hybrid Bible study on the book of Genesis, where today we will be looking at the content of Genesis chapter number 38 as we delve a little bit deeper into the psyche and the person that is Judah. Now, as we encounter here in the opening verses of this chapter, we are told that he had turned aside to a certain Adulamite. Adulamite is another way of saying Canaanite, and of course we remember issues with people here in Scripture marrying those of a different land. We remember Genesis 24 verse 3, and we also can look back to Genesis 26 verses 34 and 35 to see how those situations turned out. So Judah saw the daughter of a certain Canaanite, whose name was Shua, and she conceived and bore a son, and he called his name She conceived again and bore a son, and she called his name Onan. Yet again she bore a son, and she called his name Shelah. Judah was in Chesib when she bore him. So we are told about these three children, which is very significant, as we will find out as we go further into this particular chapter. And Judah took a wife for the firstborn, of course, and her name was Tamar. But Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord put him to death. That is verse number 6. Now, it's rather tantalizing, this verse, because we want to know more. How was he wicked? What did he do wrong? Etc., etc. Of course, we are not told about this, but we are reminded, of course, is that God knows all and sees all, and we're talking internally, externally, everything, really. But what we do know, of course, is that he was struck down. Verse 6. Judah took a wife for his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. Again, I'm sorry, I'm just rereading the same thing again, aren't I? Sorry. Verse 8. Then Judah said to Onan, of course the secondborn, go into your brother's wife and perform the duty of a brother-in-law to her, and raise up offspring for your brother. What this is known as you can see on the screen, is a levirate marriage. And this requires a brother to marry his brother's childless widow and give her children, i.e. to carry on the line. Now, if you are inclined and would like to find out more, you are welcome to check out Deuteronomy chapter 25, verses 5 through 10. And this whole concept of levirate marriage is very integral to the book of Ruth, which we did cover in a Bible study here at St. John's a number of months ago. And if you have not had a chance to read the book of Ruth recently, or even ever, head over to Ruth 1, verses 11 through 13, and Ruth 4, verses 1 through 12. Now, what's important here, throughout all of Genesis, is this notion, this importance of the firstborn. Of course, we remember Jacob and Esau and how the older would serve the younger, but as we know, in our society, is that typically, it used to be that the firstborn would be the one who would get the inheritance, or the majority of the inheritance at the very least. And of course, as we know, Judah, the line, we are really, what we're trying to find out here is the continuation of the line, which of course would lead to David, and of course ultimately to Jesus. That's why we're being told about all of these things. Now Onan in verse 9 knew that the offspring would not be his. So of course he is worried that a son born to Tamar would be ranked higher, more privileged. Again, we're talking about this firstborn language, than any child born of him, born to him. So that would reduce the importance of his own family line, and of course would also reduce his inheritance from his father Judah. So what he does is he does not, trying to keep this clean here, does not go into her. And what he did also was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and he put him to death also. So that's one brother, two brothers down, dead. Judah said to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, remain a widow in your father's house, so go back to your father's house till Shelah, my son, the thirdborn, grows up. So he's not of the age yet to take a wife. But he feared that he would die. Again, he's worried 2 of his sons have died as a result of what has happened here. So Tamar went and remained in her father's house. So these two sons had done wicked things in the sight of the Lord, and they were struck down. They were killed. However, it seems that he is a little bit scared of Tamar, and also, as was suggested in the Bible study here on Sunday, that this was a means of protection. He's lost two children. He certainly doesn't want to lose Shelah as well. Now, in the course of time, the wife of Judah, Shuah's daughter, died. When Judah was comforted, he went up to Timnah to his sheep shearers, he and his friend Hirah the Adullamite. And when Tamar was told, "Your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear his sheep," she took off her widow's garments and covered herself with a veil, wrapping herself up, and sat at the entrance to Enaim, which is on the road to Timnah. So she takes off the widow's garments and puts on a veil. Someone who is betrothed is someone who would be wearing a veil. Now, as we see here, Judah comes across her in verse 15 and believes that she was a prostitute. Now, it's not just because she was wearing a veil, but here is this woman standing there alone on the street. So he's obviously reached that conclusion. So basically he says, "Come, let me come in to you," for he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law, so he couldn't recognize her. She said, "What will you give me that you may come into me?" What will you give me? Shelah, obviously. That was what was promised. That is the levirate marriage language we have talked about already. So this back and forth goes on. "So what will you give me?" He answered, "I will send you a young goat from the flock." And she said, "If you give me a pledge until you send it." He said, "What pledge shall I give you?" She replied, "Your signet and your cord and your staff that is in your hand." So he gave them to her and went in to her, and she conceived by him. Then she arose and went away. Taking off her veil, she put on the garments of her widowhood. What she knows, of course, with all this back and forth, is that Judah is someone who is not to be trusted. Now, verse 20, when Judah sent the young goat by his friend the Adullamite to take back the pledge from the woman's hand, he did not find her. They could not find her at all. And we hear this language of cult prostitute. Again, if you are interested in this, I encourage you to head over to Deuteronomy again, this time to chapter 23, verse number 17. Excuse me, my phone has just gone off there. Right. About 3 months later, Judah was told, "Tamar, your daughter-in-law, has been immoral. Moreover, she is pregnant by immorality." So how is this woman, who's supposed to be in mourning, waiting for Shelah, of course, in the eyes of Judah, how can she be pregnant? Judah said, "Bring her out and let her be burned." So he's indignant here. And as she was being brought out, she sent word to her father-in-law, "By the man to whom these belong, I am pregnant." So can you guess what she what she brings out? Please identify whose these are. The signet and the cord and the staff. Caught red-handed, so to speak. Judah knew the game was up. Judah identified them and said, "She is more righteous than I, since I did not give her to my son Shelah," and he did not know her again. What we see here is that Judah has seen the error of his ways, and he knows that he is the one who is at fault. He acknowledges here her righteousness in contrast to his very own failure. Verse 27, when the time of her labor came, there were twins in her womb. When she was in labor, one put out a hand, so coming out first. The wife took and tied a scarlet thread on his hand, saying, "This one came out first." But as he drew back his hand, behold, his brother came out. So the other brother came out first, and she said, "What a breach you have made for yourself." Therefore his name was called Perez. Perez can mean breach, as we just heard here, or burst forth. Afterward his brother came out with the scarlet thread on his hand, and his name was called Zerah. Now, we are told about these names, of course, because of the importance of the line, the firstborn language. And what we do know is that Perez appears in the genealogy of David. And as someone correctly said, why are we being told all of this stuff? Because this is all about Jesus. This is all about Jesus' genealogy. All of Scripture points towards Christ, which is why it's so fascinating and so much fun, I think, to look here in the Old Testament, especially as we continue our journey here in the book of Genesis, where we are almost 4/5 of the way through. Next time we will be looking at chapter 39, Joseph and Potiphar's wife, and we will see some really interesting language and look at Joseph and realize and see that he was not altogether innocent in all of this. But again, I encourage you to think, reflect on what has been spoken about and shared today. If you have any questions or comments, you know where to find me, either here on Facebook or here on YouTube or via our website, www.stjohnsbridgeton.com. Many thanks. Have a blessed day. Stay safe and stay well. Bye-bye.